Welcome everybody to Awaken the Artist Within, presented by Rick Sammon. We are super excited to have him back with us today to share some of his Topaz Adjust effects that he uses. A couple technical things first. We will not be taking questions by microphone, so if you have any questions, you can just type them into your questions module or on your GoToWebinar panel. Ashley Robinson, our product manager, and myself, Nicole Pascal, will be taking your questions during Rick's presentation, and then he'll be answering a few at the end of the session as well. I'll tell you a little bit about Rick here first. Rick is a professional photographer, a Canon Explorer of Light, and a very well-known authority on processing techniques. He is the award-winning author of over 36 photography books, including Secrets of HDR Photography, Exploring the Light, Face-to-Face, and Digital Photography Secrets. He has photographed in almost 100 countries around the world and gives over 24 photography workshops and presentations each year. He also has 6 apps, both iPhone and iPad, in the iTunes Store, including his brand new Rick Sammon's HDR portfolio. And with that, I will go ahead and give it over to Rick.
Okay, well, that was a great introduction, Nicole. I really appreciate it. The only thing you left out is that I have the flu. And but, you know, as my father would say, it was in show business, the show must go on. So I have the flu, but I'm really glad to be here. Also, I'm really glad that the leaf blower guys outside stopped. You know, I rake my lawn. But these guys around here, my neighbors, they have the leaf blower guys, so at least it's nice and quiet. So anyway, I'm really glad to be back again. We're Awaken the Artist Within. Nicole, everyone can see my screen. Everything's good?
I believe so. I can see your screen perfectly.
Cool. Okay, well, as I said, I think everyone really has an artist that lies within. And I think before, you know, plugins, it was hard for photographers, some photographers, to be artists. I just thought I was just a photographer. But I think with the plugins, it's helped me awaken the artist within, especially Topaz Adjust, because it's just so much fun. So before I get into my little demonstration, it's going to be kind of like the last demonstration I did with a couple of things added. Just want to show you one of my favorite latest images created with the help of Topaz Adjust. And this is really a fun exercise. I'm sure a lot of you guys and girls out there have seen, you know, the movie or the painting, The Girl with the Pearl Earring. So this is one of my favorite paintings and one of my favorite movies with Scarlett Johansson. So here's the actual picture by Vermeer. And I said, hey, this would be a lot of fun to try to recreate this. So you guys out there, you know, find a painting that you like, because we can learn a lot from the masters. This is basically, you know, Rembrandt lighting, side lighting. You see the lighting coming in from the side. So what I did is I went to Macy's. We got all the, got 2 scarves. I did a little hand coloring here in Photoshop, got the pearl earring. But if you go on my site, if you just click on the bottom icon over here, you'll see the process that I went through. And we had the picture all around us. And it was really a lot of fun and a challenge to create this. But speaking of fun, I think one of the, you know, everyone's listened to this webinar probably got into photography for the same reason, because they wanted to have a lot of fun. I like to have a lot of fun when I teach, and I think the more fun that you have when you're, you know, photographing a person or just photographing, the more fun the subject will have. So before I go on here, here's my site. Everyone who attends any of my webinars, my seminars, my workshops, whatever, they become a student for life. So all you have to do is, and that means you can contact me anytime with any questions. So here, let me just make this a little bit larger so I can see it here. If you just go to the About page and go to Contact, click here, you'll be able to send me an email. If you can't get through now asking a question, or if you have another question about photography in general, I just click Contact, and I answer all my emails. I answer all my emails by email. Sometimes on Facebook I can't get to them. And on my Creative Plugin page, here's this picture again. I have a whole bunch of stuff on plugins, again, how you can awaken the artist within. So this is my site. It's just ricksalmon.info. I changed it to from .com to .info because I'm really all about info. And Nicole was kind enough to mention my latest app here. It's actually, we changed the name to iHDR because the app is really more about imaging, imagination, and innovation. So let's get going here. All right. Let's talk about, I think one of the coolest features one of the coolest innovations actually in the last few years was HDR, high dynamic range photography. I also call it high do-it-yourself rocking images because you really can create some really rocking images in HDR. To create a true HDR image, you have to take a series of pictures here. And what I did is I was in Times Square, and I took a series of pictures, and I created, with an HDR plugin, a true HDR program, true HDR image from this series of pictures. Here's the 0 EV setting, 2 stops under and 2 stops over. That's the basic starting point. It's not always that way. Sometimes it's 5 stops, sometimes it's 7 stops. But the HDR program did an excellent job preserving the highlights and opening up the shadows. And when it comes to HDR photography, that should be your goal. I shouldn't say should be. That is one of my main. I just never should say should. That's a goal. Preserve the highlights. Don't wash out the highlights and don't block up the shadows. So here's an image that was created again in a true HDR program. But let me show you this really cool thing in Topaz Adjust, where if you have an image, and if the contrast range isn't that great, isn't greater than about 3 f-stops, you can create a cool HDR-like image in Topaz Adjust. Let me close this up. Also, when I'm working on images, and again, I apologize for having the flu. It's almost impossible to speak here, but I'll try. I try to work with the gray screen, the gray background. When I'm done to check everything out, I go to the black screen like that. But if you work on the gray screen, you will be distracted by other colors. You also should have your monitor calibrated. I use the Color Monkey to calibrate my big machine, my laptop, my projector, and my printer. That way, if you use if you calibrate your screen, your monitor, what you put in is what you're going to get out. All right, so let me go to Topaz Adjust here, Topaz Adjust 4. Now, here's my basic tip when you open Topaz Adjust 4. Press Reset All, because if you don't press Reset All, what you did last is going to be applied to your image. As you just saw, the last effect that I was playing was applied to my image. So you really want to do that. Over here, this is really cool. You have all these little presets. And down here, we have the HDR, which is new. And I really like these two. HDR Sketch, I'll show you what HDR Sketch does. It's not the one I would use for this, but I'll show you what it does. Look at this. Amazingly, it creates an HDR image from a single image. I think that's kind of cool. But when you go to HDR Sketch, it's kind of like sketching with a pen. Sometimes you get these white lines around high contrast areas from dark to light. So I usually like to use HDR Pop. Now if you look at this HDR Pop image, not only does it pop, but it looks pretty similar to the HDR image that I created in the HDR plugin from the 3 sets of pictures, only this was much faster. Now, yes. If the contrast range is greater than 3 stops, sometimes it's 5 stops, sometimes it's 7 stops, especially if you're looking inside to outside, it's a must. You have to use an HDR plugin. But for this did an amazing job. So what I can do now is if I want to boost the strength of this, I could do that. And all by doing this, by opening up the shadow areas and toning down and preserving the highlights, your pictures, even with an HDR plugin or program, your picture's going to look a little flat. So I find what I usually have to do is I have to boost the contrast. Now, the more you boost the contrast, the more your shadows look. Your shadows are going to be blocked up, but shadows can be your friend. And remember also, here's a pretty important photo expression: light illuminates, shadows define. Light illuminates, shadows define. So the shadows are going to add some definition to your picture. So I like to do this. I like to boost a little contrast here. Now, if I want to tone down the highlights, this is amazing that we can do this almost independently. I'm toning down the highlights, and watch this. If I want to open up the shadows, I can open up the shadows. But, as I said, shadows add definition. Now this area up there is looking a little bit flat. But if you're not satisfied totally with your this is a pseudo HDR image. I'm using HDR Pop. If you're not satisfied with this, you can play around with these sliders. So I'm pretty happy with this image that I created in with just really 2 or 3 clicks. And I'm going to click OK. This picture, by the way, was taken with my Canon 5D Mark II with a 15, with my 15mm lens. Now, thing is, if you want a real fisheye effect, that circular effect, you have to spend twice as much money. You have to spend twice as much money on a fisheye lens. But I'm going to save all you guys a bunch of money by showing you how you can create that effect from a standard photograph. So what we want to do is we want to go to image size, and you want to uncheck this, okay? And we're just going to make the height and width the same, 8 and 8. Whatever you have, it's okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our elliptical marquee tool. Now, when you're using any of your marquee tools, if you hold down your space bar, I don't know if you can see these marching ants, but I'm holding down my space bar and I can move this around. So what I'm doing now is I'm trying to get the ends of this little circle here to the top, bottom, left, and right. Okay, so I have that. And I know I should be using the keyboard shortcuts, but for those of you who don't know the keyboard shortcuts, I'm going to use my pull-down menu. So I'm going to go to Select. I'm going to go to Inverse. And I'm just going to go to Edit. I'm going to fill this with black. And then I'm going to press Deselect. Now, again, this is going to be archived. So those of you who are saying, oh, man, the guy is going too fast. I can't follow along. When it's archived, you can listen again. And if I go to the full screen mode, look, that looks like the picture was taken with a very expensive, like 6mm or 6.5 millimeter actual fisheye lens. And the fisheye lens was the lens that I thought could help to tell the story. When I went to Times Square, I really wanted to tell the story. And when you're taking a picture, this is really the main thing that you want to think about. What story? This is going to come up in the next illustration too. What story? What mood do you want to create? And I thought that when in Times Square, I thought that the fisheye lens would help tell the story. Now, if any of you guys are in New York City on June 18th at 5 p.m., I'm taking the world's largest group picture. I'm going to do the world's largest upload too. And we're going to do like a photo walk too. So if you are in New York City, here's another fisheye lens shot, which helped to tell the story. Shoot me an email. Okay, let me get rid of this. And let's talk about that mood just a little bit more. We'll go here. I have CS5 over here, by the way, but some people said before they were writing me emails, oh, I only have CS3, oh, I have CS5, what should I use? I said, okay, I'll pick one in the middle, CS4. Okay, let's talk about the mood. I photographed this beautiful jaguar in captivity in Belize, in the Belize Zoo. And by the way, when you're photographing animals, and if they're in captivity, it's really a good idea to be honest and say where you photograph them. That way someone's not going to go to Belize and say, oh, I'm going to be able to walk through the jungle and photograph, these animals, which are very elusive and very, very hard to find. So being very honest is important in all photography. So I'm going to go to Filter. I'm going to go to Topaz Adjust 4. And again, I'm going to have to press Reset All, right? So I wanted to create the effect that this beautiful animal was coming out of the jungle at night. So I went over here. First I tried Dark Ghostly. And it looked okay, but it was a little too soft, and I could have sharpened it up over here. But then I tried Dark Night. And again, these presets are just starting points. So this is kind of the effect I wanted, that now it looks like, it's a moonlit night. And what Dark Night does is it really darkens the shadows, and it kind of lightens the highlights, which gives you this effect. So I'm going to go down here now, and again, I'm going to tone down these highlights, okay? I think I might boost up the shadows just a little bit. I'm going to go down here to saturation, adaptive saturation, because at night our pictures aren't as saturated, right, as during the day. Our pictures are very subdued. We don't have these beautiful warm colors. And by the way, there's no order in which to do this. Sometimes I start with exposure. Sometimes I start with the saturation. It's really up to you. So I'm going to go up here and boost this. So now, you saw before when I pressed Dark Ghostly, it was kind of blotchy, okay? which is a nice effect, you know, if you're going to make a drawing of your kid at Halloween and a ghost costume. But I wanted to preserve the details here. Look, you can still see all the hairs. Now, we could play around with you. I was playing around with the you, but I'm going to skip that and just click OK now, because I always, not always, a lot of times I'll go back into Photoshop after I'm done to see, you know, what I could do. So here I'm going to go to, and I know, by the way, I should be using an adjustment layer, but right now I'm just going to work on this to save some time. So I'm going to go to color balanced, because pictures at night have deeper shades of blue, right? Could have a deeper shade of blue, and maybe a deeper shade of this. So if I go like that and go to my full screen mode, now it looks like the picture was taken at midnight. So this is what I was talking about before, about creating a mood. You don't have, and if I go back to my histories here, here's the open. And by the way, this is kind of cool if you don't know this. If you pull down, you know, one of your histories here, down to this bottom icon over here, just like in Topaz, you know, you have that little click, you can click back and forth. In Photoshop, you could see these side by side. So what you do again is you just click on your history, which state you were at, and drag it right down here to this icon. And that's really a good way to check out your pictures. So it's the mood, it's the feeling, and any artist will tell you that it's the mood, it's the feeling of the picture that is the most important thing. You know, we can get so caught up with all this technology and all this other stuff. Think about the mood when you're taking a picture, and when you're working and playing in the digital darkroom. I'm going to show you this picture over here, Edward Hopper. Sure, a lot of you have seen his work. If you don't know him, go on his website. Go do a search for him, and you'll see all his different paintings here. He had this very soft look where he didn't have a lot of detail. You know, when we take the detail out of a scene, we take out some of the reality. When we take out some of the reality, our picture becomes more artistic, like with my Jaguar picture. We took out some of the reality. Well, we can do this with Topaz Adjust, and it's really fun. And if you have a picture, you know, a landscape picture with some clouds in it, this is really a cool effect. I'm going to open my picture here. And this picture was taken out in Bodie State Historical Park in California. And I'm glad the government, by the way, wasn't shut down, because a lot of the national parks and state parks would have been shut down. But anyway, this is a nice enough picture, but it looks pretty much like a snapshot. Throwing a couple of photography tips here. One, name of the game is to fill the frame, although there's something to be said for dead space. Here you can see I really filled the frame. I really filled the frame with interesting clouds, interesting foreground. You also notice that everything in the scene is in focus, from the blades of grass right in the front to this little, actually to the wires in the back. And to get everything in the scene in focus, what you want to do is you want to use a wide-angle lens. Here's I was shooting with my 17 to 40 millimeter lens at 17 millimeters. You want to use a small f-stop like f16, and you want to focus about 1/3 into the scene. Now that might sound backwards, because this is a beautiful sweeping landscape. You might say, oh gosh, Rick has a flu, he meant 2/3. Well, actually it's 1/3. That sets up the lens for the maximum depth of field. Okay, so let's check out this technique. By the way, if you don't know this, let me just show you this. Let me go back to, the larger the file, the longer these effects are going to take. So I'm pressing Command-I on my keyboard here. So this is telling me that this is a 1 megabyte file. So if you're playing around with raw files, and big raw files or big TIFF files, and you're new to Topaz or new to any plugin, what you might want to do is you might want to make smaller files and play around with the smaller files, so you could see, if you're a little hyper like me, you could see the effects quickly and change more quickly, rather than waiting like a long time for the effects to be applied. So I'm going to go to Filter. I'm going to go to Topaz Adjust for. Okay, I have to press Reset. Remember that? Okay, so I'm going to go to the filter that I used to call Spicify, but my friends at Topaz call it Specify. But I think they might change it to Spicify because everyone calls it Spicify. So I'm doing this. Now, Ansel Adams was big on the idea that a picture's never really done. And he would go back and change this and change that and whatever. And what I like to do is I like to pick a plugin. I like to pick a filter effect and then go over here and play around. So I like this, but if we go back to my friend Edwin Hopper over here, I was going for that soft effect because it's what the clouds were just so soft and so dreamy. So I'm going to go down here. So what I can do is I'm going to go to details. I'm going to reduce just a little bit of the strength. But I found this out by accident. I was playing around. One of the cool things, one of the really cool things about Topaz Adjust form is that you have really great noise suppression, really, and I mean really great noise suppression. You know, people say to me all the time, oh, you know, I'm in a dark room, I have to boost my ISO up to 2,000, what am I going to do? I'm going to get all this noise in it. Well, with today's digital cameras, even mid-range digital cameras, we don't have to worry so much about the noise because the sensors are improving. You know, there's some cameras like my Canon cameras have on-sensor noise reduction features, but we could also take out the noise in plugins like a Topaz Adjust. So I was just playing around with this image. I'm saying, okay, how much noise can I take out? Even though I didn't see a lot of noise in this particular image, I was playing around. And that's a little bit too much because I wanted to leave some detail. Move this back a little. Let me click Use Topaz Noise Adjust. When you click this is going to take a little bit longer because it's a little more sophisticated. However, I would suggest putting it on your iTunes and clicking Use Topaz Denoise. And again, this is all subjective. Some of you guys out there may say, oh, it looks too soft. You know, I like the original better. But, you know, this looks like a photograph, and this looks like a painting. And this is what I'm talking about, awakening the artist within. I'm going to go up here, and I think I might like this picture a little brighter. You can see what's going on down here. And when I'm done, well, you know what? This is very subjective, the lightness and the darkness. And your monitor may not be calibrated. My guess is it looks brighter or darker on your monitor than it looks on mine. But let me go down to brightness, turn it down just a little. I'm going to click OK when this is done here. And it's a little too dark. And after this, I'm going to click OK. I'm going to show you something else. I'm sure all of you guys and girls will click OK. So I'm sure all of you out there have websites. Well, here's the thing in a website. The most important thing about a website, I think, is something that your mother probably told you when you were young, that first impressions are important. And also knowing your audience. So you really want to have, you know, a killer picture out there on your website that really says what you do. Say you're a landscape photographer. Say you're an artist out there, whatever. You want a picture that really says what you do. Also knowing your audience, you know, like wedding photographers out there. You know, they have sites with, you know, beautiful music and dissolves and fades and whatever. Well, some of these sites don't work on the iPhone. Everyone has, not everyone, a lot of people have the iPhone. And also sometimes they're too fancy. So I have a very simple, my site is now a blog. It's just an e-blogger blog. And I think that I've kept it simple so people can, you know, get to what they want to know kind of quickly. So anyway, let me show you this little trick here to make a really good first impression. I'm going to crop this picture. For whatever reason, and maybe because of the HD TVs, let me get this over here, maybe because of the HD TVs or because we go to the movies, people like this type of format. It's not really a panorama, but it's just, for whatever reason, we're getting used to seeing pictures like this with the wide format. So I kind of like this. I'm going to open my layers panel here. It used to be called a palette, but they changed it. Let me move this up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this down here. I've just duplicated the layer. Get rid of this. Well, I've duplicated the layer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Image. I'm going to go to Canvas Size. Now Canvas Size isn't an image size. What I'm doing is I'm going to increase the canvas area that I'm going to eventually be working on. So Right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just increase this by the width. Doesn't really matter, 2 inches, 4, 5, 6. So I've increased my canvas size here. Because what I want to do is I want to make a really nice drop shadow. People love drop shadows, and a drop shadow is where the picture is like floating on the page. So I'm going to go to Layer Styles, and I'm going to go to Drop Shadows. Now, you could start playing around with your angle and everything in here, but some people don't know this. If you just click on your picture, see I'm clicking over this part here, I'm moving this down here so I could get my position first, and then I can play around with the set, the spread, and the size. I'm going to click OK, and I can close this. And now my picture looks like it's floating on the page. But I'm going to do something else. Now I'm going to flatten my image, and I'm going to crop my image to about the size I want. And once again, see if I hold down the space bar, I can move this around anywhere I want. So this is going to look pretty nice, but I'm going to show you one other thing we can do. Okay, now let me make sure I'm flattened. Yep, I'm flattened. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my Marquee tool over here. Just take a little while, my rectangular Marquee. Go around here like this. And again, holding down the space bar, I can move this. It's not going to be perfect because I want to get some other effects here. But I'm going to go like that. Then I'm going to go to Edit. I'm going to go to Stroke. And say I wanted to pick a blue color. So I pick blue. There's the blue. Click OK. And I'm going to change the width of this. Maybe too big, maybe too small. I don't know. Click OK. It's a little too big, but you get the idea. So there, you have a picture. If someone goes to your website, they're saying, "Oh man, that person spent a lot of time." You know, it's a little too bold. I think it would have made it smaller, like a hairline around there. That person spent a lot of time on this image. So if we start with our original image, if we go back here, here's our snapshot. We've been able to turn it into an art shot in not a lot of time. Thanks in part, of course, to our friends at Topaz Adjust. Now, people ask me this all the time too. Oh, you know, I like the effect, you know, on part of the image, but I don't like it on another part of the image. And really, this is where layers comes in. So we're gonna go here. We're gonna go to Layer. We're gonna duplicate the layer and click OK. So what we're going to do, so now we have 2 layers, one on top of the other. Let me show the layers. Okay. So anyway, I thought, you know, an effect, I wanted to bring out the texture on the wall in the back, on the car, but not really on a person's face. Some of these effects don't look great on a person's face. So I'm going to go to Filter. I'm going to go to Topaz 4 here. And I'm going to go down here to the Spicify effect, the Specify. And you're going to see it looks pretty nice on the wall, but actually in this case it doesn't look so bad, but it brings out her highlights a little too much. So what I'm going to do is click OK, and you'll see that I only applied this to the top layer. I'm clicking the eyeball over here to turn on or off the top layer. So I'm going to leave it on now. So now what you have to do is take your eraser tool, and using the bracket keys on your keyboard, I'm using the right bracket to make it larger. And you can see over here that I'm erasing that effect over her body. I'm going kind of fast because I just want to show you this effect. And there we go. So this is how you can apply any effect selectively. And when you think about it, you're really in control over every pixel in your image. Now, that's one way to do it. Let me show you another way to do it. If you have Photoshop CS4, CS5, you could go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. Watch over here, nothing's going to happen except you're going to see a tiny little icon here. And there's an advantage to doing it this way over the previous way I showed you. I just showed you that for some element users who don't have a Convert for Smart Filters. When you convert for Smart Filters, then you have this little icon here. Now I can go to Filter, Topaz Labs, Topaz Adjust for. It'll just be applied again. It should be applied again. There we go. Click OK. Now when you look over in your Layers panel, you have like a layer mask here, right? And now you could use your filters like you're using adjustment layer and a layer mask. Again, with black as a foreground color, this is a standard masking in, masking out technique, and a brush, you can just mask out, and you can see you're masking out. The advantage to doing it this way over the previous way is if you make a mistake and you're going like this, and you see I went over here, all you have to do is hit the X key on your keyboard and paint it back in. And so again, that's the big advantage to doing it this way. The other way is the fast, easy way, but this is really the right way to do it. Speaking of people pictures, this is and thinking, no, I won't do that one, thinking selectively. Let me go here. This is, you saw the picture that I showed you before, the girl with the photograph of the girl with the pearl earring. Let's go now to Topaz. By the way, whatever filter you pick, whatever last is first. That's why Topaz Adjust 4 is showing up here. So if I wanted that effect applied to this image, all I would have to do is go here to Topaz Adjust 4. I wouldn't have to go through the process. But because I don't want that effect, I'm going to go here. And in the girl with the pearl earring, the photograph, I use this portrait smooth effect. So this is what happens if you don't press reset, right? So I'm going to go to portrait smooth, and look at her. And this is my friend Chandler. Now, what's nice about this is, look at this. You can still see every hair. Somehow or other, Topaz Adjust knows that you want to just soften these skin tones. Every hair is still here, but this woman's skin is nice and soft. And we could play around with the contrast here if we want. Usually pictures that are a little darker have a little more drama to them. Let me go here. Adaptive exposure is kind of like HDR. It makes it more HDR-ish, if you want to think of it that way. I'm looking down here. This picture doesn't have a lot of noise, but I want to show you two other things here. I'm going to click OK. And if we just look, or if we want to do the side-by-side, as I was telling you before, this picture on the left looks a lot more artistic than the picture on the right. A lot of people like to have smooth skin, especially seniors. Babies, you don't need to apply this effect too much. But when you're photographing, let me get rid of this, don't save that one. When you're photographing people, think about smoothing out their skin. Another photography tip here, by the way, is when you're photographing a person from the side like this, or when they're looking off to the side, you don't want their nose just sticking off the tip of their cheek. It looks kind of funny. You want to use the cheek as a background. So let me show you two things here. Next time you go through the supermarket stand, look at the whites of the eyes of the subjects. I'm going to go to my Dodge tool. I'm going to enlarge this. And when you look at the whites of the eyes, you'll see that the art directors have white in the eyes. I can almost predict this, that every magazine you look at is going to be like, whoops, I used the wrong tool. Control Z. Oh, I didn't want my brush tool. This is what happens when you have the flu. I'm going to go down here, I'm going to go to my Dodge tool. So what I'm doing is, I'm going to do this a little more than I normally would so you could see the effect. Okay, and again, I'm overdoing it, but if I zoom out here, you'll see, if I go here, her eyes are a lot more prominent in the picture. And again, please, I'm overdoing it so you can see, you don't want to overdo it. But this is really a good technique for portraiture. When you're starting out doing this, when you pick your Dodge tool, you see I have my exposure set at 20%. You should really have it set down at like under 10%. And the reason being is if you have it set at 100%, I'll just show you, it whitens too fast. So what you want to do is you want to have it down low so you have more control. Also, I'm using a Wacom tablet, and a stylus. If you're really into your art, you want to get one of these tablets. It's a pressure-sensitive tablet. You don't have to go back up here all the time and change the exposure. You turn over your stylus. It has a little eraser on it, electronic eraser. It really gives you the ultimate control. Let me go back here. We'll just leave it with this. Now, the Renaissance painters, we're talking about art here. We're going to go to, let me see what I want to do here. We're going to go to filter. I think I might want to go to distort. We want to go to lens correction, right. We want to go to filter, distort, lens correction. The Renaissance painters darken the edges of their pictures to draw more attention to the subject. Ansel Adams, one of the most famous landscape photographers, darkened the edges of his pictures to draw more attention to the subject. And that's what we could do here with the vignette tool here. Now I'm darkening the edges, so that's right, more attention goes to the model. Here's the open picture, right? It's a nice, before plugins were invented, I might have used, actually if I was shooting black and white, I would have used a yellow filter to soften the skin. If I was shooting color, I would have used a soft focus lens. They used to have a lot of the camera manufacturers actually made soft focus lenses or soft focus filters. But here, with the, whoops, UPS just came. I got to like shoo them away. Let me go back here to Topaz Labs. Topaz Adjust 4. Let me get I like that. Click OK. Good. Going to go to filter, distort. Going to go to lens correction here. I hate that grid. Then I'm going to darken the edges and click OK. So now we have a nice, artistic picture. Again, by darkening the edges, our eyes go more toward the main subject. Very cool, very cool, very easy effect. Okay, we got time for a few more, Nicole, I think.
We actually have, okay, go ahead.
No, we have to wait. We have questions?
Yes, we have lots of questions, and we have about 7 or 8 minutes left, so I thought we could move on to questions. But if you want to show this one real quick, go right ahead.
I just want to show one more because this is really cool, too. I have one of the best digital cameras on the planet, a Canon 1DS Mark III. And let me go here and close this. Now, our eyes, and this is really important, it's really important to see the light. We have to learn as photographers to see the light. We have to learn how to see the contrast range in the scene. Here we have some pretty strong contrast. Subjects are backlit. We have to learn how to see the direction of light. We have to learn how to see the quality of light, hard or soft, and we have to learn how to see the color of light. And if you go on my blog, ricksammon.info, just in the search window, I talk about this a lot. So we have to learn how to see the light. Then, in the digital darkroom, we learn how to control the light. So again, I have one of the best digital cameras. I'm always exposing for the highlights. I don't want the highlights overexposed and washed out. So I'm checking the overexposure warning on my camera. If I take a shot like this and the brightest part, which is over here, is blinking, I'll underexpose. I will underexpose a little. I'll check the histogram to make sure I don't have a big spike over here on the right. So there's my exposure. That's the best straight exposure that I could get out of my camera. Now I'm going to go to Topaz Labs. I'm going to go to Topaz Adjust 4. And because our eyes have a dynamic range, again, of about 11 f-stops, I could see into the shadows here. But digital cameras have even the best digital cameras have a dynamic range of about 5 or 6 f. Well, I think about 5 f-stops. Some have 6. But if I just click specify or specify, and if I zoomed in here, now you can see some of the details in the shadow areas, and I didn't lose any of the highlights. Look at this. Now if I'm going to zoom in, look at this. I could see into these shadow areas, and I didn't lose any of the highlights. If I click OK, there's my shot. If I go to my histories, let me go here, go like this. If I go here to open, I could show you both. There's the before and there's the after. And maybe this looks a little too saturated. I could desaturate it. But the point I wanted to show you is that, you can't, it's hard to take a high dynamic range picture of a moving subject. It's really hard to make a high dynamic range image if you have like 30 or 40 or 50 moving subjects like you have here. But this looks pretty cool. So again, all this stuff can help you not only awaken the artist within, but it can also help you get shots that look more like the scene look to your eyes. Okay, Nicole.
All right, thank you. Just a few technical questions here real quick. What lens did you use for the New York City image that you showed?
Yeah, that was I was shooting there with two lenses. Now it had that effect because I had a full frame camera, my Canon 5D. I was shooting with the 14 millimeter lens and I was shooting with the 15 millimeter lens. I think that was taken with the 15 millimeter lens. I'll check and I'll go back because a lot of times I do the same shot. But if you have like a Canon Digital Rebel, which is a cropped sensor, you're not going to be able to get that effect. But you can simulate that effect, using the technique that I showed you, where you change the image size to the same top and bottom and left and right. You're talking about this picture, right?
Yes. Yes. Keeping on that picture, Juan asks, the results of Topaz Adjust and other HDR programs can sometimes have very similar effects. And what are your thoughts and ideas and experiences about how to go about using each?
Right. Well, if the contrast range isn't greater than about 3 stops, I'm looking if I could find, looking for. Here the contrast range. Whoops. Here the contrast range. Oh, I lost it. Wasn't that great. Let me get back to Creative Plugins on my site here. Here the contrast range wasn't that great. Okay. So I didn't need. Actually, this was Photomatics plus Topaz Adjust. Topaz Adjust gives that little artistic edge. Here, it was HDR Effects Pro. Here, I did have a very wide contrast range. So if the contrast range is greater, like down here in this picture I have over here, where I'm shooting inside to outside, or this picture here of this girl shooting inside to outside, this is a must. The contrast range is probably about 7 stops or 8 stops. You have to use a true HDR program to capture that dynamic range. And the thing is, even in Camera Raw, you can pull out a lot. You can pull out a lot from the shadows and a lot from the highlights. But when you do that, you start to get some noise in the dark areas. I want to talk about that in my iPad app. So here's a situation where I definitely needed an HDR program. But I also had a little Topaz Adjust because from the bright white to the deep shadows, this was really a high contrast range. So it's all about learning how to see the light. Here, 3 stops, didn't need it.
All right, thank you. And kind of going on the HDR effect, Sean asks, what is your response to critics who might say that some images are pushing it too far or overdoing it with all the HDR?
Well, after we've done the webinar, if you guys listening want to have a lot of fun, go to Google, and type in, "I hate HDR." You'll find hundreds, you'll find thousands of pages of why people hate HDR. Well, the thing is, it's all subjective. When Picasso did his Cubist stuff, people probably said, "Oh, I hate Picasso. I hate the Cubist stuff." But it's really the effect that you want to create. Like in this picture here, I wanted to create more of an artistic effect. For the New York picture, here, this is an HDR picture here. I wanted a very realistic picture. This doesn't look like an HDR picture. This might look like an HDR picture. This doesn't look like an HDR picture. And this, if I didn't tell you it was HDR Topaz, we tend to label all these things. So if you want to have some fun, type in "I hate HDR." But in a scene like this, if this is a straight shot and you want to see some detail like you see here, you have to go to HDR. But you know what? Getting back to why we got into this in the beginning, and we got into it because we really want to have fun. Okay, so here's just like an HDR. I couldn't get a scene like this inside and outside without HDR. You wouldn't want to use an HDR effect on a scene like this. I could open up the shadows. And by the way, Topaz, in focus is totally amazing. If you have a slightly out of focus picture, this is really cool. And if I could just close this for 1 second and show you one picture here. Get back to my little Topaz folder here. But you see that I have all these other Topaz. If I was talking about Topaz Denoise, check this out. If you shoot JPEG files, or if you have old JPEG files that you want to get some of the noise out, this is really cool. In focus is the one I mentioned. But just look at this picture. Took this in Cuba. Here's the original. And that's pretty amazing, I think, that at the touch of a button you can create. You know, this is like a pseudo HDR. And look at right here, we can't see under the shadows here. Yet with our eyes we can. So this is really more the way it looked to my eyes. This is I took this picture in 2001, first Canon digital SLR they had. Here's the original, kind of flat, and here is the HDR. This is how it looks into my eyes. So people who say I hate HDR, you know, a lot of HDR is overdone, and guess what? You know, we all go through moods, and we all go through different points in our life. And I have to say, I've been accused of overdoing some HDR, and I would have to agree with the people because you know you try it, and but then you move on. I'm not sure, but maybe Paul McCartney, you know, maybe Obla Di Obla Da isn't his favorite song compared to one of the other maybe more different one of the other songs with more changes and more lyrical words. And I really can't speak for him. I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. We all go through phases and we all change, and that's part of growing as an artist and looking back and saying what you liked and what you didn't like about what you did.
Well, thank you so much. I think the information here today was awesome, and people are commenting that they got a lot out of it already. So thank you very much for presenting this, Rick. I appreciate it.
Well, listen, it was a lot of fun. And once again, it's ricksammon.info. You go to the About page right here, and you'll see, if you want to see me like skydiving, falling through the air at 125 miles an hour, click here. But again, just click on the Contact Rick. And I answer all my emails. Sometimes, again, on Facebook, don't get to them all, but always here.
All right, I'm going to take the screen back from you here. If you have any questions, you can contact me at webinars@topazlabs.com, and you can contact Rick through his blog. And if you want to keep up to date on some of the upcoming webinars, it's www.topazlabs.com/webinars. Thanks again, Rick. That was great.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for listening, and hope to be back again. We'll do it again.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.